One thing that you mentioned a couple of times is the fact that we're intending to shine a particular light on a subject that not too many people know a lot about, but also on a subject that really deserves attention, which began last week with the Safe Birth for All, where Toni Pyke, who will speak next, was involved in the organisation of that. So Shane, thank you very much indeed. And just to mention too that if anybody has any questions or comments or queries, feel free to drop them into the chat and we will definitely come to them towards the end. And to say too that this will be recorded and you will get a recording of this afterwards also. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Toni Pyke, who works with AMRI, who is the Justice Officer at AMRI. And Toni is going to speak to you about her recent visit to Angola, where she witnessed some work that was being done, and can talk to you a little bit more about how the Safe Birth for All campaign is trying to highlight the issue, this important issue of obstetric fistula. Shane shared with you a map of where the prevalence of obstetric fistula occurs, and he also told you the number, so you can see why this is a real issue that the Africa Europe Faith and Justice Network would actually like to shine a light upon. And what we're beginning tonight is really just the start of a campaign. We're hoping to try and keep this issue alive and to keep it to the front where it has previously not had a proper viewing at all. So Toni, you're very welcome. So I'm going to hand over to you. Toni, you have the floor, and you can share your slides and your sound when you're ready to go. Thanks, Toni.
Lovely. Thanks, Brian. Well, good evening, everyone. And it's fantastic that there's so many people here. It's also a bit like a reunion. I can't wait to chat to everyone afterwards. I'm, as Brian said, but I'm not a medical doctor. And I'm really glad that Shane did the medical side, because I find that still quite difficult to grasp, and you know, the numbers, the maternal mortality rates there are quite staggering as well. And I'm going to talk to you about a particular area in southwest Africa that we visited recently, and I'm going to bombard you now with more photographs. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I need to stop sharing. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I need to add my sound, share sound. That's the one.
It.
Sorry, and then go on. Okay, has everybody got that?
We have. Do you want to run the slide? That's it. Now you're away.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, as Abigail mentioned, obstetric fistula is an issue of human rights. The fact that women and girls continue to be at risk of obstetric fistula in this modern technological age is a shocking failure and a denial of women's access to their fundamental basic human rights, and dismisses and ignores their human dignity. In this presentation, I'm going to share my experience of a recent visit to Angola, where we were able to see firsthand some of the realities on the ground for women and girls. So in early January, myself and Spirit and Father Edward Flynn, who's on the call, and Irene Carson, who's also on the call. Irene is a midwife for many years in the NHS system in the UK. We all travelled to Angola to learn more about the realities on the ground for women who experience obstetric fistula and the ways in which the efforts for its prevention are taking place. Now, Angola, as I said, is situated in the southwest of the continent of Africa. It borders DR Congo, Zambia, Namibia, and it was a Portuguese colony until 1975, and then it was in civil war until 2002. And it is, under the Human Development Index, a middle income country. Life expectancy is still less than 62 years, and over 15 million people continue to live in extreme poverty. During our visit, we met surgeons who performed fistula repair surgeries. We spent time in hospitals that catered for maternal care and who had the necessary expertise to carry out fistula repairs. We had stories of women who had or were living with fistula, some for more than 40 years, and others who had had many surgeries with only limited success. We listened to stories of abandonment, stories of joy. We listened to stories about the psychological legacy of living with the injury and the social stigma that resides alongside it. And we met the many advocates who are committed to the prevention of obstetric fistula. And here are some of them. I want to introduce you here to the brilliant team of the local NGO Vitoka, which means Rise Up in Umbundu, who facilitated and welcomed us during our stay in Angola. And even though there's only a small team, their outreach across the vast country is immense. And I'm very happy to give a shout out to Petra, who I see here tonight, which would be great to, if you have any questions around Angola, she'd be the perfect one to answer them for you. Another introduction. This is Kimiana. Kimiana has been living with obstetric fistula since she was 16 years old. We met her at in the rehabilitation visit at the CEML hospital, the Evangelical Mission Hospital in Lubango. She shared with us her experience of living with fistula for 11 years. She talked of not being able to go to church because of the constant leaking and of the shame that she felt in front of others. She also talked about the pain of the continuous leaking of urine that wet the inside of her thighs and burned her skin. This was Kimiana's 6th fistula repair operation. And while she said that she felt much better, she was not completely healed, telling us that there was still a small amount of leaking. Now, it's never good to begin with an apology, but however, my apologies to those who did attend the launch of the Safe Birth for All campaign last Tuesday. But I'm going to read a very short version of an extract from the brilliant book, Cutting for Stone. And I'm doing this again because I feel the author, Abraham Verghese, best describes the essence of the experience of those living with fistula. He writes, "Late one morning, a frail, barefoot girl, no older than 12, came stiff-legged up the hill with her father. They crept forward like snails, while other visitors sped up when they neared these two. When they reached us, I understood why. An unspeakable scent of decay, putrefaction, and something else for which the words remain to be invented reached our nostrils. I saw no point in holding my breath or pinching my nose, because the foulness invaded instantly, colouring our insides like a drop of ink in a cup of water. Worse than the odour was to see in her face the knowledge of how it repulsed and revolted others. No wonder she had fallen out of the habit of looking at human faces. The world was lost to her and she to it." The impact of obstetric fistula on women is traumatizing. Not only is it a physical injury, which many years of persistent incontinence and other medical complications, such as prolonged infection. Most often the baby is stillborn, and in some cases the women can become infertile. And in countries like Angola, where motherhood is key to a woman's social significance in her family and her community, this can be quite devastating. And added to this, women and girls who live with fistula are faced with the longer-lasting damages and experiences that impact on their basic human rights and their human dignity. Due to what the women call a foul smell from the constant leaking, they are ostracized. They cannot attend family or community events like weddings or funerals. They can't go to church, as Kimiana pointed out. Often they're abandoned, neglected by their husband and their family. They are ridiculed. They are not supported and cannot earn a living themselves, which severely impacts on their psychosocial experience. Father Edward often likens this experience of women living with fistula as modern-day torture. So key to Vitoka's work is through their community outreach and their community approach. Through local ambassadors, Vitoka tried to reach as many women on the ground to raise awareness of obstetric fistula and inform women that living with fistula need not be a life sentence. Marcolino in the front, in the middle here, is one such ambassador. He is pictured here with his wife, Lorinda, herself a fistula survivor. Despite the travel limitations and the various challenges, Marcolino is still able to reach out to remote areas and find the women and raise awareness and hope to those living with fistula and to conscientize those who may be at risk. The women pictured there in the top left-hand corner were gathered at Marcolino's home and were waiting to meet us before they took the long trip to Quito, to the hospital by taxi, to register for a fistula repair campaign that was taking place at the Walter Strangway Hospital there. And here they all are. A couple of days later, Edward, Irene, and I also travelled to Pyke to visit them all. The women were assessed and registered for surgery and then waited in turn for their repair. During this particular campaign, 99 women registered for surgery. Some of these had re-registered for surgeries that were previously unsuccessful. We met one woman who was there for her 10th surgery. The average number of years that a woman with fistula in Angola that lives within Angola is around 12 years. Working around the clock, the doctors and nurses were able to conduct 87 repair surgeries during this campaign, and that left 12 disappointed women. Some of the surgeries were too complex to be carried out during the campaign and were referred to a visiting surgeon like Dr. Michael Breen, who would come from Madagascar for another campaign. Pyke tried to organise at least 4 campaigns a year. This is a mammoth task, with 20,000 women estimated to be living with fistula throughout Angola and 1,500 cases, new cases every year. The capacity to repair fistula in the country is currently around 600 per year. Now, I'm not great at maths, but this doesn't remotely address the need on the ground. So prevention really is the key. And these fine people are the wider campaign team who organised and carried out the fistula repair camps throughout the year. Doctors travelled from around the country, experienced in fistula repair, and they undertook as many surgeries as they could over the week. Now, don't forget that the surgeons are mostly not located in Pyke, so that means that they're absent from their own hospital for that week. Dr. Paolo Parambelli here leads the team and performs the surgery, but also conducts training at the same time. And this is inside the OR. Irene and I were hugely privileged to directly witness 2 fistula repair surgeries in the operating rooms. The second surgery we experienced was a difficult one. The fistula was too deep to repair vaginally and necessitated the surgeon having to try and repair the fistula through an abdominal opening. Watching the fistula repair surgery isn't for the faint-hearted, and I have to confess I was a little traumatized by the experience. The complicated surgery was a challenge, and it was taking much longer to repair, which meant that there was less time for all the other patients waiting for surgery. While the young woman was under local anaesthetic, she was aware of her surroundings, but unsure of what was going on. And none of the surgical team spoke Mbundu, which made communication very, very difficult. Having personally experienced a very difficult first delivery and a C-section for my second child, I knew that we could still feel what was going on without necessarily understanding the intensity of the pain at the time, at least not until the next day, which is where my concern lay at that moment. I couldn't help but think about the pain that this poor woman was going to be in the next day and the next. I did think it was fantastic that she had the opportunity to have the repair surgery, but saddened that she was there in the first place. And after the surgery, the women and girls spend around 6 to 8 weeks in recovery. Given the numbers of women, several recovery centres were established. The aftercare is critical to support the healing, and this can be challenging. Some of the women had no one to care for their children, so needed to have them with them. We met a small number of family members who had travelled with the patient to look after the children while the mother recuperated. This meant that they too were away from the village and the fields, and they were challenged financially. The living conditions were also challenging during their stay. In Bailundu, in Huambo province, we listened to stories under the mango tree. A group of survivors, community mobilizers, and Pyke ambassadors shared their stories of living with fistula, of watching family members and their friends struggle with the trauma of living with fistula and their commitment to supporting the prevention in their community. We were also alerted to the repercussions of the psychological trauma of fistula, and hugely fortunate that one of the team members of Pyke is a trauma counsellor who was able to support the women there that day. This confirms the need for holistic responses to those living with fistula and wider prevention programmes. Now, you've met this lady before. She was the one on the operating table in the OR with a difficult repair surgery. Her name is Celestina. Celestina has had four pregnancies, but only one has survived. She, to me, is a warrior woman, smiling and giving thanks to God for having had the opportunity to have received the surgery. The team there were hugely committed and worked really very hard. So my prayer is that that the surgery was successful. And the next 3 slides are just to show you the hospitals that we visited. The first was in Luanda, the hospital maternal infantile, which took many years to become a reality, but this happened through the persistent commitment of Dr. Manuela Mendes, who's the director of the hospital, who's been working for 50 years to support women who experience fistula. And this is where Dr. Paulo, who was leading the team of surgeons, that's where he is based. One of the key challenges is for women to get to the hospitals from their rural locations. So if you see here in the bottom right-hand corner, this was the start of what they call a waiting house, which would accommodate women before the surgery and during their recuperation, and also might serve as a waiting room for those women who may need cesarean sections. I'd say it's probably built at this stage. Petra will be able to shine a light on that later. Then the next hospital, we traveled over to Kalakembe, which is about a 12-hour drive from Luanda. Here, doctors Priscilla and Dan Cummings led the maternal care unit and also undertook fistula repairs. And they're also building waiting houses for the women to come from the rural areas. And this is back to the CEML hospital, but I put this back up here to show you that the women were also involved in rehabilitation programs and livelihood strategies as well. And these are just some of the faces of the key responders, the traditional birth attendants, midwives, counsellors, fistula ambassadors, survivors, family members, nurses, doctors. Since our visit, Vitoka staff have conducted fistula awareness trainings in some of the colleges, and some of the graduates have agreed to support rural outreach to ensure that information and communication around obstetric fistula and that people are conscientized, and that the prevention of obstetric fistula becomes a priority. So, oops, that was it there. Sorry, and this is Petra here, who's doing more training with the women while they're in the recovery. And this is the crowd of nurses and midwives who have just received their training on obstetric fistula. And then this is why AMRI, the Medical Missionaries of Mary and Geneva for Human Rights, through Father Edward Flynn, launched an awareness campaign, which you've heard about before, called the Safe Birth for All campaign, on Tuesday last week. The campaign was officially launched by Mrs. Sabina Higgins at the Stephen's Green Club in Dublin. The focus of the campaign is to raise awareness of the wider issues of human rights and human dignity, as it encompasses the realities and experiences of women and girls who live with or are at risk of living with obstetric fistula. It focuses on the reality that obstetric fistula is a preventable childbirth injury, and that together we can all make a difference. So I'm going to leave you now with a very short video, just photographs of the campaign, and then Lara is going to outline some of the key asks of the campaign after this. So thank you all very much for your patience in listening to me. Oh, and the music isn't playing, sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry about that. We can see the picture, see the people. There we go.
Yeah, it's not working. No.
Not to worry, not to worry. Well, we can hear it actually, we can.
No.
Roseanne card.
It's grand. It's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Great.
just there is a website, Facebook page. We're on X and we're on Instagram as well. And I'll share those details later with everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you indeed, Toni. Thanks very much for your super presentation. I mean, it really brought it to life to us. And like when you see the picture of Celestina, she just looks so very, very young. And Votoka, I love the name Votoka, rise up. And when you read from Cutting from Stone, the world was lost to her and her to it. It really kind of says it all, really. You mentioned that Lara is going to come in a little bit later on, and she will come in a little bit later on. But just before she does, you mentioned human rights and dignity and advocating for the whole issue, but specifically referencing the fact that obstetric fistula is a human rights issue. And with that in mind, we had invited Jennifer Philpott-Nissen, who is an advocate, a human rights advocate with 25 years experience, particularly working at the UN in terms of trying to create a greater awareness around particular human rights abuses and difficulties. And she has direct experience of investigating and challenging governments on their human rights record. She unfortunately can't attend this season, but what she did do was she had sent to us a short video explaining who she is and what she does, and she definitely wants to be part of this event this evening. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to share her presentation so that you can hear exactly what she wanted to share with you. And